You weren't supposed to hear this. Not like this. Not tonight. Not alone, with the lights low and your mind unguarded. Because the stories you're about to hear, they don't end when the video ends. They follow you. They settle into the cracks of your thoughts. They wait for silence, and then they speak. Most people think fear is loud, screaming, chaos, panic. But real fear is quiet. It's the moment you realize something is wrong and no one else sees it. It's the instant your instincts whisper, leave, but your body doesn't move. It's the understanding that you were never meant to notice what you just noticed. These aren't just stories. They are fractures in reality, moments where the mask slips, where something hidden reveals itself for just a second too long. And the worst part? The people in these stories survived, which means what they saw, what they felt, what they barely escaped, is still out there, waiting. You've been told your whole life that the world is safe, structured, controlled, that danger is rare, predictable, containable. That's the first lie, because beneath the surface, behind the systems, the rules, the normalcy you cling to, there is something else, something older, something patient, something that watches, and sometimes it steps closer. Tonight, you're not just listening, you're remembering, because somewhere deep inside you, you already know this feeling, that quiet dread, that subtle shift in the air when something isn't right, the sense that you're being observed, not by someone, but by something that understands you better than you understand yourself. So listen carefully. Don't look away, don't skip ahead, because once you start this descent, you don't climb back out the same. And the first story? It begins somewhere that was supposed to be safe, a place designed for laughter, for families, for innocence. But something went wrong. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to reveal what was never meant to be seen. It started with something small. That's how it always starts. Not with terror, not with chaos, but with a subtle disruption. Something just slightly out of place, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. A booking mistake, a simple human error. That's what they told themselves, at least. A campsite that wasn't supposed to be crowded, suddenly filled with noise, artificial noise, bright lights where there should have been darkness, laughter where there should have been silence. And right next to it, an amusement park. Think about that for a second. Two environments that should never exist side by side. One built for escape into nature, the other built to simulate joy. Real versus artificial, silence versus noise, instinct versus distraction. That contrast alone should have been enough to trigger something deep inside the mind, a warning system older than language. But it didn't. Because humans are conditioned to override instinct, to accept discomfort as coincidence, to trust that everything has a logical explanation. That was their second mistake. The first was staying. You have to understand something most people never realize. When reality feels off, It's not always because something is wrong with the environment. Sometimes it's because something is wrong with who's in it. The adults were irritated, distracted, complaining about the loss of real camping. They thought the problem was inconvenience, but the problem wasn't the campsite. It was what the campsite was connected to. Because places like that, transitional spaces, hybrid environments, they create blind spots. And blind spots are where things hide. The boy didn't want to be there. He never did. His discomfort wasn't just about dirt or bugs or sleeping on hard ground. It was something deeper, an internal resistance, a quiet refusal to submit to an environment his instincts didn't trust. But even he couldn't explain it, so he ignored it, like you've ignored that feeling before, like everyone does, until it's too late. Because once night falls, those places change. The noise dies, the lights dim, and whatever was hidden during the day gets closer. Not rushing, not hunting, just observing, waiting to see who notices. And that night, two boys did something they weren't supposed to do. They crossed a boundary, and they thought they were the only ones breaking the rules. They were wrong. There's a moment right before you do something reckless, where your mind gives you one last chance to stop. Not fear, not logic, just a quiet question. Why am I really doing this? Most people ignore it. They replace it with excitement, with ego, with the illusion of control. That's what they did. Sneaking out felt like freedom, like rebellion, like reclaiming power from a world that constantly told them where to go, what to do, how to behave. But freedom without awareness is just another form of control, because the moment you step outside the boundary, you're no longer the one setting the rules. The fence around the amusement park wasn't just a barrier. It was a line between two systems, one visible, one not. Climbing it was easy. That's what should have scared them. No alarms, no resistance, no real effort required. Just a quick boost, a quiet drop, and they were inside. That's how thresholds work. They don't stop you, they let you in. The park was different at night. Not just empty. Wrong. You've been to places like that before. Schools after hours, malls after closing, streets that feel unfamiliar once the crowds disappear. Same location, different reality. Because energy lingers, and when the noise fades, you start to notice what's underneath. Every step they took echoed, not loudly, but enough to remind them they didn't belong there. The ride stood still, frozen in unnatural positions. The metal structures creaked softly, even without wind, and the lights, the few that remained on, didn't illuminate. They exposed. That's the difference most people never understand. Light doesn't always make things safe. Sometimes it just makes it easier to see what's already there. They moved like it was a game, dodging security, hiding behind buildings, timing their movements. Adrenaline disguised the fear, but adrenaline is a liar. It convinces you you're in control, right up until you're not. Because while they thought they were sneaking through the park unnoticed, they never stopped to ask a more important question. Who else moves through places like that after midnight? Not guards, not employees, not people who belong there. Something else, something that doesn't need permission, something that doesn't follow rules, and something that had already seen them long before they saw it. The higher you go, the more exposed you become. Most people think height gives you control, a better view, a stronger position, an advantage. But that's only true when you understand the environment you're in. They didn't. Climbing the roller coaster felt like conquest, step by step, gripping cold metal, pulling themselves higher above everything, above the park, above the ground, above the rules. From up there, the world looked small, manageable, harmless. That illusion is what cost them, because perspective can deceive you. You think seeing everything means you understand everything. But what if the most important thing is the one thing you can't see? At the top, everything went quiet. Not normal quiet, not peaceful, heavy, like the air itself was aware of them. They stood there, looking out over the park, convinced they had beaten the system, outplayed the guards, mastered the moment. But something had shifted, subtly, permanently. Because once you reach a certain point, you don't just observe the environment begins to observe you back. That photo they took, it wasn't just a memory, it was a timestamp, proof that they were there at the exact moment something else became aware of them. People underestimate moments like that. They think danger announces itself, that it builds, escalates, gives you time to react. But real danger, it's already there. You just haven't noticed it yet. And the moment you do, it's already too late to undo the fact that it noticed you first. They stayed up there longer than they should have. That's another pattern. Humans linger in places they shouldn't be, stretching moments, chasing feelings, ignoring the quiet signals telling them to leave. Because leaving feels like losing. But sometimes leaving is survival. When they finally climbed down, something was different. Not in the park, in them. That subtle awareness, that quiet tension in the chest, that instinct that says, "You're not alone anymore." They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to, because both of them felt it. That invisible pressure, that sense of being watched, not casually, not randomly, but intentionally, like something had taken interest. And interest is the beginning of something much worse than fear, because fear can fade, but being noticed, that doesn't go away. They started heading back, faster this time, more focused, less playful, because deep down, something inside them already knew. They weren't trying to escape the guards anymore. They were trying to leave something else behind. Something that was already moving, already adjusting, already closing the distance. And in just a few seconds, they were going to see it. It doesn't rush. That's the first thing you need to understand. Whatever they saw that night, it didn't chase immediately. It didn't scream, didn't reveal itself fully, didn't act like something desperate. It moved with control, with patience, and that's what made it worse. They were crouched in the dark, bodies still, breaths shallow, waiting for the security guard's golf cart to pass. The soft electric hum rolled by like nothing more than background noise. Normal, safe, predictable. That's what the human mind clings to. But fear doesn't come from what's obvious. It comes from what doesn't fit. At first, it was just movement, a flicker, something shifting where nothing should be shifting. Your brain does this thing. It protects you by lying. It tells you it was a shadow, a trick of the light, your imagination filling in blanks that don't exist. But then it happens again. And this time, someone else sees it too. That's when denial dies. Charles tapped his arm. No words, just a silent confirmation. You're not imagining this. About 30 feet away, there was a figure, crouched, still, watching. Not walking through the park like a lost visitor, not moving with purpose like security. Mirroring them, hiding, observing. That's when the fear changes form. It's no longer about getting caught. It's about realizing you're not the only one trying not to be seen. Think about that. Two boys breaking into a place they don't belong, hiding from authority, and then discovering something else doing the exact same thing. But not for the same reasons. Because whatever that man was doing there, it wasn't for fun. It wasn't for curiosity, and it definitely wasn't harmless. The guard hadn't passed yet. They couldn't move. They were stuck, forced to exist in the same space at the same time with something unknown. That's a rare kind of fear. Not the fear of being chased, but the fear of being aware while completely unable to act. And then it moved. Fast. Too fast for someone injured, too deliberate for someone lost. It crossed into the light for just a second, and in that second, everything changed. Because now, it wasn't a shadow anymore. It was real. A man. Disfigured posture, unnatural movement, and his face. Not just dirty, not just shadowed. Smeared. Dark. Wet. That wasn't paint. That wasn't mud. And both of them knew it instantly, because some things don't need explanation. The human brain recognizes them on a primal level. Blood. Fresh. Unhidden. Unapologetic. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the way he looked at them. Not surprised, not scared, not even curious. He already knew they were there, and for a moment, it felt like he was deciding something. Not whether to run, not whether to hide, but whether to come closer. And that moment, that silent, invisible calculation, that's where the real danger lived. Because once something like that sees you, you're no longer just passing through. You've become part of its awareness. And awareness is the first step to becoming a target.
There's a split second in every encounter with danger where reality fractures, where your mind is forced to choose between two truths. This isn't real, or this is happening right now. Most people hesitate in that moment. They freeze, they question, they try to understand. That hesitation is what gets people hurt. But this time, they moved. Not because they were brave, not because they had a plan, but because something deeper, something older than logic took over. Survival. The guard passed. The hum of the cart faded into the distance, and just like that, the illusion of normalcy returned. But it didn't matter anymore, because now they'd seen him. And once you see something like that, you don't go back to who you were 5 seconds ago. They didn't speak, not a single word, because language would have made it real, and part of them still didn't want that. They moved fast, not running. Running would make noise, but fast enough that their bodies betrayed the calm they were trying to fake. Every step back toward the fence felt longer than before. The park stretched, distances warped. That's what fear does. It bends perception. 5 minutes turns into forever. 30 feet feels like a mile. And every shadow feels alive. He wasn't behind them, at least not that they could see, but that didn't help, because now the fear wasn't in front of them anymore. It was everywhere, behind every structure, between every gap of darkness, inside every blind spot their eyes couldn't reach. That's the evolution of fear most people don't talk about. It stops being about what you saw and starts becoming about what you can't see anymore. They reached the fence, the same fence that had been so easy to climb before. Funny how that works. Going in feels effortless. Getting out feels like escaping something that's already too close. Hands slipped, metal scraped, breathing got heavier, not from exhaustion, from urgency. Because deep down, they both felt it. That pressure, that presence, that silent certainty that if they slowed down even for a second, something would close the gap. They dropped down on the other side, back into the campsite, back into what was supposed to be safety. But here's the truth nobody tells you. Crossing back over a boundary doesn't mean you left everything behind, because some things don't respect boundaries. They walked back to the tent, same path, same ground, but everything felt different now. The sounds of the campsite, the distant laughter, the rustling trees, the faint hum of electricity from the park, all of it felt artificial, like a cover, like a thin layer placed over something much darker. They didn't talk about it, not then, not immediately, because saying it out loud would force them to confront the one thing they were avoiding, that what they saw wasn't random, wasn't harmless, and wasn't finished. They lay in their sleeping bags, eyes open, bodies still, waiting, not for sleep, but for something else, something they couldn't explain, something they couldn't see, something that might still be out there, deciding if it was done with them. Morning doesn't erase the night. That's another lie people tell themselves. They think sunlight resets reality, that whatever fear existed in darkness dissolves with the rise of day. But fear doesn't disappear. It hides, and sometimes it waits for confirmation. The morning felt normal, too normal. That kind of normal that feels staged, like everything is trying too hard to prove nothing is wrong. Voices returned, campers moved around. The distant amusement park came back to life with artificial laughter and mechanical noise. The world resumed. But they didn't. Because once you've seen something real, you start noticing how fake everything else feels. They packed their gear like nothing had happened, avoided eye contact, avoided the conversation, because both of them knew the moment they said it out loud, it would become something they couldn't ignore anymore. So they stayed silent, and silence can be just as dangerous as fear. Around mid-morning, someone from the campsite staff came through, casual, routine, but there was tension behind it, the kind of tension people try to hide when they don't want panic to spread. An announcement, short, controlled, but heavy. A man had been found dead, not far from there, a few miles away.
stabbed. Late last night. Let that settle in. Late last night. While they were inside the park. While they were hiding behind that structure. While they were watching something move in the dark. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. The description came next. Disheveled. Male. Late 30s. Possibly injured. Possibly covered in blood. Still at large. And in that moment, everything aligned. Not slowly, not uncertainly, instantly. Because the human brain is designed to connect patterns when survival is involved, and this pattern was undeniable. They didn't need proof. They didn't need confirmation. They had already seen him, 30 feet away, breathing the same air, existing in the same space, a man who had just taken a life and hadn't decided what to do next. That's the part that stays with you. Not just that you saw something dangerous, but that you were close enough to become part of its next decision. They said nothing, not to the staff, not to the police, not even to their parents. Why? Because fear doesn't just paralyze your body, it rewires your judgment. At that age, survival meant avoiding trouble, avoiding consequences, avoiding attention. They convinced themselves it wasn't their responsibility, that someone else would handle it, that staying quiet was safer. And maybe it was, but silence has a cost, because every decision you don't make becomes part of who you are later. They left the campsite early, packed up, drove away, and physically they escaped. But mentally, that night never ended, because years later they still think about it. Not the climb, not the thrill, not even the fear, but that moment, that single moment when a man covered in blood looked directly at them and didn't run, didn't panic, didn't react like someone being caught. He just looked, like he already understood something they didn't, like he was measuring them, weighing them, deciding, and choosing not to act. That's what stays with you, not what happened, but what almost happened. Because the truth is, they weren't lucky, they were spared, and there's a difference most people never think about. But once you do, you start to realize something uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't survive because you escaped danger. Sometimes you survive because danger decided you weren't worth it. And that realization, that changes you. Because now you understand you were never in control. Not that night, not in that park, not in that moment, and maybe never, ever.